Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Sponsored by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks and Dr. David E. Graves. Now let's explore the field of archaeology in today's episode.
Well, welcome to today's program, Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. My name is George Sparks. I have with me Dr. David Graves, co-host and also special guest. Dr. Aaron Judkins is an author and explorer and archaeologist from Texas. He has a passion for searching for truth about the mysteries of the past, exploring forbidden archaeology, forbidden history. He is also a producer known for Finding Noah in 2015 and Hidden Mount, the Los Lunas Mystery Stone. I believe it's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Los Lunas, New Mexico, I believe, 2012. He has appeared in Footprints in Stone, Forbidden History 2 in 2013, and Watchers 8, 2014. Dr. Aaron Judkins has participated in numerous excavations throughout the United States and Israel, including the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem in 2004. He is credited for mapping the longest dinosaur trackway in Western Hemisphere, discovering a new trail of dinosaur tracks named the Judkins Trail. So they named it after you. That's cool. Dr. Aaron Judkins has been featured on both international radio and TV podcasts, including Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, I believe that's how you pronounce it, and History Channel's H2. He is a guest radio show host for Epic Voyages Radio on the Inception Radio Network. He is also a host of his own show called Man vs. Archaeology. His PhD is in biblical archaeology. And for interviews and speaking engagements, you can go to www.aaronjudkins.com. And for his website, we'll post that in the podcast. Welcome to our program. We got a lot of interesting information to share with us today. So welcome, Dr. Aaron Judkins.
Hey, good morning. Thank you all for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to come on your show.
Yeah, good to have you again and see you again, Aaron. We go back to Qumran together as we dug there a few years ago. So pleasure
That's
to
right.
catch up again.
That's
So
right.
guys,
that was back in 20. When was it, David? I already forgot. 2016, 17.
Yeah, something
so.
like that. I've been working over in the Middle East for 15 years, so I get my seasons all mixed up. And I just know that year I didn't dig it at Tel El Hammam. I worked at Qumran and at Shiloh. So it
Yes.
can only do so many digs a season.
Right.
So you both worked together with Dr. Randall Price and
Yes. Oren Gutfeld.
Right, is at Qumran, and you're searching at the Dead Sea Scroll caves, and you also had another experience together at Mount Ararat, and I believe Dr. Randall Price was involved in that as well. So there's a neat connection here. It's kind of rare to find two people at the same time on the program at the same time with this interesting past, but it's going to be pretty interesting. So David, you want to get us into this early part of, let's say, where you met at Qumran?
Yeah. We didn't know each other before that, and we joined the small group with Randall Price because I was teaching with Randall, and he knew my interest, and I have a PhD in archaeology as well, and that was my background. So he asked if I would like to join on, and I said sure, and that's where I met Aaron. We became acquaintances at that excavation. There was only, I don't know, there's probably about 15 or so people, or I don't know the exact number, 15 or 20 of us. A lot of students from Liberty University and a few friends, and Rick Schuler, aka
That's
John
right.
Denver. We became good friends. But we had a lot of fun there. And I think it was 2 weeks or so that we excavated it was the first caves since the 50s that we excavated down to bedrock. And it was a pretty
Yeah.
cool experience. And we found a scroll there, but it happened to be blank. There was nothing written on it, but we did find enough evidence to indicate that this was a Dead Sea Scroll cave, and it became AKA Cave 12. And then, of course, you went on to work, or had worked on Mount Ararat. However, I was working with a different team at the time and doing research, and had a heart attack, couldn't climb, so I couldn't be part of the expedition that year. But I had done some preliminary work in the Ahora Gorge with Archaeology, and was the operational manager for them during that period of time. So we have a connection with Mount Ararat, but not at the same time and on the same team.
Right.
So that's our background. And I did my PhD in Turkey, and you did research in Turkey. So
Yeah, I did. I after before our Qumran excavation, which was towards the end of 2016, very beginning of 2017. So 3 years prior, in 2013, is when I climbed Mount Ararat. Now I was on the team, which was under Dr. Richard. I just went blank. Dick Bright.
Oh, Dick.
You'll have to, yeah, Dick Bright. So I was under the team with Dr. Dick Bright, Richard Bright, and of course Randall was on. Dr. Randall Price was on that team, and several others. But that particular year, neither Randall was there or Richard, and so part of most of the key leadership. Matter of fact, Randall and Richard, couldn't be there. So it was a pretty interesting time there in 2013. So by the time I had met you, Dr. Graves, this was my expedition 3 years prior on the mountain. So it was with this particular team. However, as I said, Richard and Randall couldn't be there. There were different reasons for all that, but so it made it a very interesting time. It was one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. But it was definitely a highlight of my life. And then moving forward, to the Qumran dig, and being a part of that group with Dr. Price and yourself and others. It was just a historic event that made international headlines, and none of us really knew that was going to be a Dead Sea Scroll cave. It just turns out that the evidence showed that it was. So,
right.
Some amazing things that we've been a part of. Certainly Mount Ararat, the expedition there. This was featured in a film called Finding Noah.
I found an anomaly on Mount Ararat. It's definitely a man-made object. How it got there, I don't know, and that's not for me to find out. It's for whoever goes up there and does it.
We're on our way.
We see it in every culture. The flood was a common story told, and there was an ark that saved humankind.
I think the Ark of Noah would be the ultimate archaeological find.
This is not a normal part of the world. This is a hostile part of the world. We had the PKK, we have the Turkish army. Needless to say, they don't like one another.
If we don't go, we won't know. Somebody has to take up the challenge.
Let's go find an ark.
I think there's so much evidence that it's irresponsible not to look.
I've had my worst nights of my life on that mountain. I've frozen on that mountain. I've been bloody on that mountain.
The air is much thinner. Breathing is hard. We knew we were on the brink of what could be the greatest archaeological discovery so far.
We will either prove that yes, it is here, or no, it is not.
And this went out in theaters across the country in 2015.
Right. Yeah, my work was, I think, previous years. I'd have to look up the dates exactly when Rex and I went. Rex is the president of Archaeological, and our job was going to be to get permission to do the ground penetrating radar of the glacier. I think it was the Epic Glacier. I forget the name of it now. ABIC 1 and ABIC 2. Anyway, we ended up getting permission from the local government and hike into and climb into the Ahora Gorge. It's on the Armenian side, so it's very rare that someone gets access to that area. And so we did do the hike and the walk. We were looking for any kind of evidence with pottery from that time period. And we ended up getting detained. The fellow that gave us permission, they said didn't have the right to give us permission. The guy that had permission was out getting groceries for his family or something. But our Sherpa, or our guide who was with us, happened to have gone to military school with the commander. And so he got us off the hook, and we were able to recover our cameras with our photographs. And it was quite an experience, really. We were doing the preliminary work and trying to get our permits to do the climb and to do the work that you went on to be a part of, and which Randall eventually became a part of doing some GPR. But quite an experience. It's quite a far away in Turkey, not that safe, and to get there and to do the climb and be part of the expedition is quite something. And I understand you climbed to the top.
Yes, all the way up, to the summit. So our team was a very large team. We had it was basically broken up into two parts. First was the expedition excavation crew, and then the second part of the team consisted of the film crew. There was many of those guys coming and going. We had cameramen, and this footage that they filmed there was just some outstanding footage that they shot there en route to the summit and on the Eastern Plateau. So our target was on the Eastern Plateau. There's the summit. There's many false summits, but when you finally get to the true summit, then you have to kind of go back down and around back to the Eastern Plateau, which is on the Armenian side.
Yes.
Right off the, right above the Ahora Gorge. So we were right on top of all that. So it makes it a very challenging environment to do anything in.
Yeah. I guess one of the highlights for me was the military had a post on the Armenian side, the Turkish military, and they had a pair of stationary binoculars. They were huge. And you could see the fly on a goat from anywhere with those binoculars. So I had an opportunity. They allowed us to actually look along the entire outside area of the mountain, of the Ahora Gorge area, and see if we could see anything there. And yeah, we didn't see any ark, but it was pretty cool to be able to look through their military binoculars and search the entire Ahora Gorge area of the mountain on the Armenian side and see what we could see. So,
yeah.
And this is all preliminary, of course, for the future expeditions that were going to take place. And if I hadn't have had a heart attack, I probably would have been able to join you. And
I see.
Yeah, my expertise was I was formally trained in ground penetrating radar for archaeology in an ice field. And so my job would have been to run the GPR equipment for the expedition. And that was supposed to be my role.
Oh, I see.
Never took place, but that was God's will, and we live with it.
Well, Dr. John Bryant from Dallas came up and did the GPR work during that 2013 season. And of course, he didn't come till later. We were already up on the summit, and he had some commitments that he had to settle first, and then he came. We were already up on the summit working, but he did send one of his technicians, Jose, and Jose came with the GPR basically ahead of him by a day or two, and we actually started doing the scans. I put that sled on, and because you have to pull it, somebody's got to be back there reading it. So I actually, hooked up to the sled and just pulled it up and down the Eastern Plateau on several different occasions, and that's very challenging up there at 17,000 feet to do that. But it was uh, it was something that was required. I mean, this is part of the scientific work that's required. That
Right.
we're trying to look for a superstructure under the ice, and so it makes it very, very difficult.
That's right.
Let me
And
ask you a question.
GPR,
So let me interrupt for a second, because when you went up, you said you went up with many people. How many people go up with you when you did this?
You know, I it's probably this isn't just a rough estimate because it's been so
Yeah, that's
long
fine.
ago I don't remember, but probably a dozen or so on the excavation side, and maybe close to a dozen on the film crew side. So now I served I served multiple roles in this journey. The first role was as one of the archaeologists to help verify if there was a superstructure on the mountain. Two was associate producer of the film, and three was the team medic. So I took on at least three roles there, and of course, others. You got to do what you got to do up there. Everybody has to double up on duty, and of course, I talked about pulling the GPR sled, and I drilled with those ice core drill bits. So everything that was being done up there, I was a part of for sure.
Since you just said that, you in the introduction, I failed to mention that you're a helicopter pilot, right?
I'm not a pilot, no. My other career is as a flight medic on a 911 helicopter.
So I thought maybe you cheated halfway up. You took your helicopter.
No, yeah,
Because
that's
it leads to the question, because with all these people, do you start from like a certain sea level, and is there a pathway going up, and then in the pathway slowly as you get higher and higher starts to dissipate where now it's rough terrain? Can you give our viewers an idea what
yeah.
that is like?
So unlike Dr. Graves, who climbed on the north side, on the Armenian side, up the Ahora Gorge, I've never been on that side. That's a very difficult side to climb. I'll get back to that in a moment if you remind me. But I climbed on the south side of the mountain, so you don't start at sea level. You're I think already at the base of the mountain. I think elevation's about 5,000. Now this is all just rough guesstimates from what I remember, but they can only get you so far to the mountain on that side. So we traveled, in this shuttle bus as far as we could. We get out and then we hike to first base camp, which is at the foot of Mount Ararat. And I think that hike took us 6 or 8 hours to get to first base camp. And then so from base camp one, then you set up, get your tents, because you just don't climb straight up this thing. You got to acclimate. And part of this is climbing in stages. So when you're at base camp one, we're there. We climb to base camp two. We hang out there for an hour or two, come back down to base camp one, spend the night again. Next morning, break camp up to base camp two, and then we're there. And then you acclimate, and then the same thing. It's as when you by the time you get to 4,200 meters, which is about 14,000 feet, you're on a side. You're on the side of the mountain. There's no level spot, and it's mostly rock in that area. And so you just try to pitch your tent the best way you can, and hope a big rock doesn't come falling down on you in the middle of the night. And then from there, from 4,200 meters, then you push the last 3,000 feet up to the summit. So once you leave 4,200 meter camp, there's no turning back. You're committed pretty much.
yeah, the saying
So
is
it's
you climb high and you rest low. So you climb up and then you have to acclimate, as you say, because people can
yes.
get into the loss of oxygen is a real issue. And so you do have to be in pretty good shape. And the problem for me was I was climbing with Rex Geisler, and he lives in Denver, which is a mile-high city. I live at sea level here in Canada. So for me, it was a huff. And then, of course, with my heart not being in good condition, I've only got 20% left now of function of my heart. So I'm in rough shape. But back in those days, I was still huffing and puffing as I was going up. And Rex even commented it was kind of funny. But yeah, it's a challenge, and you go from rock, and then you get into the ice cap area, where you got to end up turning into crampons, and maybe you can talk about those. And
So
Yeah,
let me
there.
ask you, since you did this real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you saying, did you guys have to like work out before you did this?
I didn't get to meet with anybody prior to leaving for Turkey. For me, I was flying out in Arizona over the Navajo Nation, so I was at about 6 or 7 thousand feet there elevation. So I was there for half the month. I'd come home for half the month, here in Glen Rose, which is not very high, and I would train. And incidentally, this is what athletes do. They go from, they train at lower elevations, then they go to higher elevations and train, and then they come back down. And so I was doing that anyway. So I just started training when I could, and I come back home, and I hired a personal trainer to help me, because I'm not going to do that by myself. Uh,
and I did the
uh,
same thing, Aaron. I did the same thing. I had
yeah,
a
and
private trainer, but I
yeah,
say I live at sea level, so I didn't have the advantage of being able to be up at 5,000 feet. Rex, he climbs those mountains in the Colorado and on a regular basis, so he had the advantage over me. But you do have to train, and like I said, I had a private trainer, and you had one, and
yeah.
you need to do that really, because it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, my legs never bothered me going up or down. Um, it's and it hits your lungs, eventually, and then you at some point you will get hypoxic, which I did around 15 or
Okay.
15,500 feet, somewhere there. I did start hitting stages of hypoxia. Um, but it's a very difficult environment. And then, like you said, you get out of the boulder field, and then you have to put on switch your gear to the ice snow gear, because now you're getting up on the glacier. So you do have to switch over into, switch out your hiking boots uh, over to your ice boots with crampons. Those are the ice picks under your boot that grab on to the ice.
Yeah.
And
I'll
you're
show some photographs of the layout of the mountain as well, and identify the different Abic 1, Abic 2, and the glacier and stuff, so people have a little bit of an orientation as to what we're talking about. But yeah, it's a different change of a landscape for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's extremely challenging. Um, I've got some slides and stuff I'd like to share if we can.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let me
David.
see if I can pull some stuff up here. Okay,
Perfect.
yeah, so here's my slides. So, as I said, this was our search back in 2013 for Noah's Ark. This gets back into a lot of flood traditions around the world. We have several across North America, South and Central America, Europe, and the Middle East, and around Asia, and of course, all the way through the Pacific Islands and Australia. The point is that there's a common thread, a common denominator about a global flood, Noah's Ark, and in this concept of a Noahic deluge. And we have these accounts that are separated by culture, time, and distance all around the world. Now, their stories may have changed over time. Their Noah may be a different Noah, the size of the ark. It changes according to culture, and over history, that story will change. But the common thread is that there was a Noahic deluge. Now, in geology, we see a lot of, and in paleontology, et cetera, we see a lot of these seashells on top of mountaintops. These are some of the examples of some of these, what they call index fossils, at very high levels. This bottom one's here at the Rocky Mountains at 14,000 feet. You can see these little index fossils embedded into the rock. And then in Bolivia, I was there the following year in 2014. These are some at about 14,500 feet. and of course, the geology, when we're looking at different types of geology, they want to understand, well, where's that age, or how do we age this rock? And sometimes they'll do it by a fossil. And if they want to date a fossil, they'll look at the geology and they'll say, well, what kind of rock is it in, so they can date it. This is a process of circular reasoning. So if they want to date a fossil, they use the rock layer. If they want to date the rock layer, they'll use a fossil in that layer to try to identify it. But we see that still at the Kaibab limestone, that we are actually still finding index fossils at high elevations. So let's look at the top of the north rim of the Grand Canyon. It's almost 1.5 miles above sea level, 1.4. And we're finding fossils. Fossils are indicative of these marine creatures that lived underwater, yet we're finding them at very high elevations, these fossils. Top of Mount Nebo.
Yeah, it's actually overlooking the excavation. I worked it for 15 years at Tel Hammam. I can see it from Mount Nebo. Cool.
Yeah, you could probably see these index fossils here, and I'm sure you've probably seen these, Dr. Graves. But again, on Everest, we're finding fossils. These looks like ammonite fossils here, the big round ones. In Cambridge, basically published in their geological magazine, these are some of the highest fossils in the world.
And I have some photographs of some we found in the Ahora Gorge on the backside of Mount Ararat. So I've got evidence of those I've seen myself.
Again, this is the standard chronology of the geological column. And we're finding Cambrian fossils on top of mountains like Everest. So this is problematic, especially for geology and paleontology, because the evidence is pointing to something contrary. That is that there was a global deluge across the world, pointing back to Noah's flood in the book of Genesis. So the evidence is really giving us other data, and that is that this data is showing that, hey, we got all this index fossils on top of high elevations across the world. So maybe this is not what they think it was, which is they say the present is key to the past. Well, we see in the past, when we look in the past, such as looking through rocks or fossils, that this is showing a record of catastrophe, not slow eons of time. So we get Cambrian fossils at the top up here, and now we're going to go to Mount Ararat. This is in eastern Turkey, and this is a view of the mountains. It's one of the largest land masses on Earth. So you can see, as I was talking about earlier, you can only get up so far, and then they have to drop you off, and then you start hiking to the first base camp. This is going to make a little bit more sense, but we're finding fossils here too, embedded in the rock.
And Aaron, just for people to understand, there's a lesser Ararat on the right side that's a smaller.
That's right.
So it's not shown in your photograph, but I have a photo of it. But you can see the two of them. There's one that's a little bit smaller on the right side. It's part of the mountain range of Aratu.
That's right. That's right. I had a presentation I presented at the Archathon conference when Dr. Shockey was still alive, Don Shockey. And of course, I knew him personally, and I presented the evidence for Mount Ararat being the mountain where Noah's Ark was landed. So you're right. There's a greater Ararat at 17,000 feet, which is what we're looking at, and then there's the lesser Ararat at 14,000 feet, which is just right next door.
And what some folks might not understand as well is that from where this photograph is taken, you have a geological formation called Darupanar that some people have claimed is Mount Ararat. So that's a different topic and subject we can talk about with Ron Wyatt and all the rest. But right now we're talking about the two mountains that pertain to Mount Ararat, the tallest mountains in the whole region. And if there was a flood, this would be the most logical place for the ark to come to rest on.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So that my whole presentation was based on why I think Mount Ararat is the mountain to look on, not another mountain. Now I know there's alternatives, as you just stated, Dr. Graves, to your point, that the Judkins site is about 20 miles away from Mount Ararat. And there's other candidates that other researchers have looked at. That's several hundred miles from Ararat.
Suleiman and
Suleiman, yeah. So there's other candidates, but particularly, yeah, I think Mount Ararat is the candidate to be looking on, and we can talk about Judkins here in a minute. But we were looking at this, and this is the pharaonic boat in Egypt. I visited there back in 2008, back when Egypt still had its old original museum there, and National Geographic was there taking photos of some things, and it was pretty neat to be in that, to get to go in the old museum. But people say, well, okay, if this story's true and the ark is there, it's built out of wood and it's not going to last that long. Well, you got to look at some other examples here. In Egypt, this particular boat, now different setting, of course, but this boat was buried with one of the pharaohs. It wasn't assembled like this, but we see that they had taken these this particular boat and buried it with the pharaoh, and I think it was unassembled. But this basically shows that yes, wood can survive under the right conditions for thousands of years, whether it's in sand or in ice. So this one is particularly 4,500 years old. So I don't think this boat was ever used. I think they just basically built it and then buried it with the pharaoh. But it does show that wood and even rope can preserve under the right conditions. And this is rope that was found with the boat and just as old. So now we're going to look at the map here of Turkey, and you see Mount Ararat, which there's a lot of geopolitical challenges here in this area. We have some of the rebel Kurds that are labeled by Turkey and I think probably perhaps by the UN. They're known as the PKK, which is the Kurdish freedom fighters, rebel fighters. They're at odds with the government of Turkey. This is the picture showing Greater and Lesser Ararat here that you were talking about, Dr. Graves. And that's a beautiful photo. This is looking from the Armenian side, north of the mountain, looking towards the north part of the mountain from the Armenian side. This is the Korop Monastery here in the foreground, which I visited, where they held St. Gregory the Illuminator in a dungeon prison for, I think, 13 years or something. That was a long time. He was in prison there for sharing the gospel. I went down in that chamber dungeon where they held him in. Well, let's look at some ancient writings here that talks about what do we see historically in archaeology. Well, we have the Sumerian Kings list that talks about a flood account. We have the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, and then we have the Atrahasis epic, which is a Babylonian flood account. These all are talking about different parts of this time period. Of course, they have their own little different accounts, but again, the common denominator is that there was a flood. One of the most interesting things, I think, is this Babylonian world map that had a cuneiform writing on it, and it designates this area of Armenia as Urartu, and this is the area where Mount Ararat's at. But on this particular Babylonian map, there's 6 countries and 7 islands on the map. So here we see Babylon, Assyria, Haban, Armenia, Dari, and this other one called Jakinu. But here, where the red rectangle is a area they've labeled Urartu, which is pretty interesting. And we go back and look at Josephus in the historical record. he talks about all the writers of the barbarian histories make mention of this flood and of the ark, and Berosus among whom is Berosus the Chaldean. And then he talks about Hieronymus the Egyptian, Nicholas of Damascus, and Naeses the Great, and many more make mention. So this is the Jewish historian talking about others who have mentioned this very same thing. And he says the ark settled on a mountaintop in Armenia. Remember the Urartu for Armenia. This is the area where Armenia sits. The Armenians call that spot the landing place, for it was there that the ark came safe to land, and they show the relics to this day. So this Josephus saying they're showing the relics even in his time from the landing spot. The land also possesses remains of the ark, remains which to this day are shown to those who are curious to see them. And then we have Jerome, an early church father, says therefore the ark from which Noah was saved with his family rested at the cessation of the flood, not at an unspecified place in the mountains in Armenia, which have the name Ararat, but at the highest part of the Mount Taurus, which looms over the fields of Ararat. So again, just pointing this to a particular geographical region. Now, when you look at eyewitnesses, so we've looked at ancient history, writings, some artifacts. Now we're going to look at some eyewitnesses. These are primary sources, if you will, that are needed to verify evidence. George Hagopian was one such eyewitness in 1904, and he claims that his uncle took him up to see the ark, and he climbed up on it, and he was probably 10 years old. He went twice, and these are some of the sketches of just from his accounts from what Alfred Lee right here. Alfred Lee is talking with him. This is, I think, from the 1970s, and he drew these renditions of what he saw. And then you have a sketch of a photo by Russian soldiers in 1917 that looked very much like the 1904 witness from George Hagopian, from that photo there and that photo there. Now you have the 1917 Russian sketch of what they saw, very, very similar. And then we have one from George Green and his photos. This goes back to the 1950s, particularly 1952. This is just a rough drawing that he made. And this is Ed Davis, which is one of the leads we were following when we were climbing Ararat in 2013. Ed said that when he was stationed in the Army Corps of Engineers during World War II, he was stationed there. This particular village, he was an engineer, and this particular village didn't have any water down to the village, and so he did, what any good engineer would do, and he just took some dynamite and blew the rock and got the water to flow down the village. Well, as a thank you to him, the village chief, his name was Abbas, sent his grandsons up to see if any part of the ark was visible. It was. They came down and they said, we want to show you what they called the Holy Ark. We want to show you the Holy Ark. So he got a leave of a couple of days, and they took him up. Abbas' grandsons took him up, and he said that they went up to this particular area, and he saw it broken in two pieces. One was kind of hanging out over a ledge. He could see multiple levels in it. He could see windows going across the top. He could see cages inside. The plan was to go up and over it the next morning, because that was the only way they could get to it. They had to go up and then around the side and come back down to it. Well, overnight, they got hit by a very severe snowstorm, and that forced him off the mountain, and this was all he could see. He didn't get to go to it, but he did say it was in two pieces. This is a painting rendition of what he said it looked like when he saw it, again, broken in two pieces, separated by this valley, and then, of course, a little waterfall that fell down into a pool down below, which is pretty interesting because this is, again, witnessed in 1943, And so when people say, well, okay, you're searching in 2013, so how do how do you know it's still there? Well, it's probably buried under a lot of ice. If it's on the Eastern Plateau, you got to remember that back in World War II, there was some planes flying to the front to fight, and these particular planes were about halfway to the front where they began to run out of fuel. They hit a big storm and they were running out of fuel. They didn't have enough to turn back, and they didn't have enough fuel to push forward. So they had to abandon these planes on the ice in Greenland. Since the same time period in 1943, they abandoned these planes. Several of them crash landed on the ice. They were rescued eventually after probably about a week. They had to get a dog sled team out to them, but they finally got to them. But since 1943, there was a guy who he wanted to see if he could find these planes. And so he was looking with GPR, Dr. Graves, and these planes since 1943 were under 260 feet of ice. So we know where the planes were abandoned. We know the conditions of them when they were left. And since 1943, they had moved quite a distance, I think a quarter mile, a half mile away from where they originally were at. And they were under 260 feet of ice. So if the Ark at the time of Ed Davis in 1943 certainly could have moved, it could have fallen down, it could be buried under a lot more snow and ice.
Well, the thing to also remember, Aaron, is that a glacier moves, and
That's
so
right.
it's whatever's in it along with it. I'll just also mention that for anybody that wants to dig into this even more deep, there's a book called The Explorers of Ararat that was published by B.J. Corbin, and also the fellow I hiked into the Ahora Gorge with, Rex Geisler. And all those stories are actually, and all the evidence is actually published there in that book. A glacier certainly moves, and it can certainly take and break things up pretty bad. So it's probably in a number of pieces by now.
Yeah. Well, and since 1943, the site where Davis is at is we estimate about 90 feet of ice is over this area now. That's the target location we were trying to find. But again, it's extremely difficult. But you do have, these different sketches and drawings from eyewitnesses that have the same type of structure. It's a rectangle shape. It has multiple levels, windows, etc. These accounts are all separated by time and distance as well. So
I actually personally know Alfred Lee and was out to lunch with him, so I can testify to it.
Yeah. Alfred Lee has been here several times to Glen Rose. This is Dr. Don Shockey. This is him holding a little piece of, pot in his hands. I was in Albuquerque and I was going through this photograph, this photo art gallery. I saw a picture of Dr. Shockey in there, and I said, "Well," and I talked to the guy, and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I took that photo of Dr. Shockey," and he gave me one of the original negatives that it's black and white prints that he had of it still, and he went in the back and got it for me. But Dr. Shockey was one of their ARC researchers as well. Mm-hmm. Now we get to James Irwin, who
his wife is still part of our Archaeological Society group.
Mrs. Irwin.
Yes, yeah, Mary.
I sent Mary a letter inviting her to the Archathon, but the letter got kicked back, so I guess I had a good address for her. But I still got the letter somewhere, but that was from years ago. It never got sent. But certainly, Richard. This is where Richard Bryant comes into the picture. He was a young airline pilot, and just went to Colonel Irwin's office. Now he was one of the guys who walked on the moon, and he was very well known by this time, and he spent the remaining part of his life after he retired out of NASA to search for the Ark. Of course, nearly dying on one of those expeditions, but Richard Bright went to his office basically unscheduled, unannounced, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I hear you're looking for the Ark. I'd like to join the team." It was about a year later that James then invited him on the team. And then when James Irwinwood couldn't do it anymore after he died, then he passed all this down to Richard.
The story
This
is that Jay, yeah, he was he fell and I don't know, he broke his leg or damaged his leg, had to be taken off by the helicopter. The joke is now, of course, is that he can walk on the moon, but he can't walk on Mount Ararat.
Yeah, that's funny. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
Well, there's a picture of him
laying
laying where he fell there. This is a picture where they got to him the next morning. So pretty tough. This is Dick Bright, and who I was talking about earlier, and he's been up the mountains at least 30 different times searching for the Ark. And we're using up to date satellite technology trying to target where we think the Ark may be. This is looking straight down from an aerial satellite view from the summit, and this is what we're estimating.
Where we get our name from Ark imaging. It's not Noah's Ark, but it's archaeological imaging.
That's right. Yeah. Back in 2009, this is the way they thought. This was positioned under the ice with the satellite view. This is the 2009 dig site. And then, they think, okay, well, maybe that broke into. And so this is prior to the 2013 expedition I was on. But they had one of the local Kurds there helping them was executed. And that team got ordered off the mountains. They burned the vehicles. I think they were trying to do, excavate a road through here. And, they burned the dozer and the vehicles, and my understanding is he was killed. Now, this is several years later in 2013. This is Mount Ararat behind me here, and this is a beautiful clear day, which you don't always get there, but it doesn't look that big in the background, but it's giant when you get up to it. This is our team right before we're going to hike up to Base Camp 1. So you can see, we got a good group there. In the center is Brent Baum, who is the director of the film. We have Matthew Marsden in the light blue shirt next to him, and then director of photography in the green shirt. And then I'm right next to him on the very right hand of the photo there with the yellow bandana. So we're about to go up, and of course all of our local team down there at the bottom.
That's a good photo. We were looking at the weather forecast a month before we started our trip, and it was cloudy and overcast and severe weather every single day. And the day that we happened to do the climb, we ended up having the same kind of days you have. Although it does create its own little weather system on top of the mountain, and it started to get overcast, we had a beautiful day for climbing. So those are pretty rare on Mount Ararat. So you're good to get one.
Yeah. You can see how far from even the foot of the mountain we are here. That's why it takes you all day to get there. But you're looking at about 3.5 miles from the base of the mountain up. So follow the yellow brick road here with me. That gets you and I think that's the first base camp or the second. I don't remember now. And then from 10,005, you get to the 14,000. So, yeah. So actually, there's another base camp under 10,500, then 10,500 second base camp, and then 14,000. And then this is a look at 14,000 feet here. You can see all the rocks and how slopey it is. And you can see Lesser Ararat, in the very background. But a beautiful rainbow there one day. This is a look at our camp, and then looking down under the clouds from 14,000 feet. So you're way on up there at this point. That's the route to the summit. And then from 14, now you're going to push to the summit at 17 here. And of course, you don't stop at the summit. We had to descend and go around to the eastern side of the plateau. And then you have things like crevasses when you get up on the glacier that they look safe on the surface, but underneath they could drop 100 feet down or so. And unless you're roped in or something, you're not going to be found probably. So very dangerous mountain to climb on. We had one of our climbers actually fall through a crevasse right there. It looks safe. Crevasse is all blanketed by snow and can't see it. And he fell through. He was roped in. The guy behind him pulled him up and out to safety, but we don't know how far that crevasse went. So it's challenging. This is at the summit at our camp here. We dug up a hole there in the ice glacier to get water. This about a period of 3 or 4 hours where you could get actual melted water from the glacier. You can't drink that glacier water straight away because there's a lot of bacteria and who knows else what's in it. So you have to different ways of purifying that water before you drink it. So I used a filter. We had chlorine tablets. I had a light that you put in to sterilize. It used a light frequency, and it also sterilized, kills any bacteria in that water. Yeah, that's.
What time of year did you climb, Aaron?
That was in August. That was in August there. And my coat that you see, that red coat, didn't get to me until the day before I left for the summit. I had to order it from England somewhere because it's in the middle of the summer, and I was ordering all this ice equipment and gear. And my coat was mailed from somewhere in England back to the States, and from the States to Turkey and to the base camp. And then it went on horseback up to 14,000 foot camp the night before I pushed for the summit. That coat came.
Well, I had a sponsor that was actually one of the members of our university, and so he sponsored me and sent me a whole lot of great gear and my crampons and my jacket. So I was fully equipped, but I never got to use them on top of the mountain.
Yeah, this is what it looks like up there. So going back to Ed Davis, where I said we think it's full of ice, like 90 feet of ice now. This is what we're looking at. It's just ice and snow. You can see our camp over there on the left. So it's a big area to search. And there's the dig site there. All right, this is winds hit us about 80 miles per hour, and you can see conditions of the tents there, and they just get buried. Dick Bright on the year prior, I think the 2009 expedition, he got buried in his tent. He almost died from hypothermia in that tent. You can see how deep they get buried. That's the top of Randall's tent right there with his. You see all that ice and snow that got piled up there one night. Yeah, it's dangerous. All right, there's Dr. Bryant there with the GPR.
You just heard about the Sherpa that was, he showed up after a week on Mount Everest. Did you hear about that? No, it's been on the news, I guess, the last few days that after a week, there was a storm that blew in, and anyway, he got separated, and he lasted for a week and ended up surviving, but they don't know how. That's Rendell's tent. Wow.
Yeah. This is some of the GPR equipment.
Yeah, there we are.
Yeah.
To me.
Of course, setting it out on the Eastern Plateau here and girding it off. These are some of the seasons prior to the 2013 expedition I was on. But you can see it's sloped, and you have to get all this data, and get it and, back in the computer and look at it and read it. So this is going back to the 2011 expedition here. That's the main dig tent. And of course they're digging down, and trying to hit one of these pieces they think is under the ice back in 2012. So they're tending there to hit there, and they think they missed it, but there's some of the GPR data here from the dig site that's come up under the ice. These are auger holes that were made looking for wood. So you take a drill and you're drilling down in the ice and you're trying to pull up wood. So this is the dig tent up on the top, and this is the chamber that they dug down below trying to hit using chainsaws. You can see the ice core drill there in the center. And then eventually you're gonna get down where you're gonna need a ladder to get down in there and to keep working. This looking back up toward the top. Here's a video of them actually doing that work.
Did they ever find any wood?
Not in the 2009 dig season, no.
Okay.
And you can see how labor intensive this is. This is so labor intensive right here. Just logistically trying to get all this equipment up to the mountain, getting it set up, trying to find your dig target site, and then I mean, this is massive amount of labor here involved.
We do our archaeology in Jordan now. Same idea. We have a tripod, and we bring it up in buckets and wheelbarrows, actually.
Yeah.
Dump it, but same idea.
Yeah. And
well, not as cold.
Not as cold, that's right. Yeah. This is Bill and Mill, our father-son team that's made multiple climbs. They climbed with me in 2013. There's Dr. Bryant and I together. And that's Kevin DeVries pulling the sled there this time with one of the locals. And then Jose in the very rear reading all the data. But you can see the Ahora Gorge just right behind him there. That's a drop off over the Ahora Gorge there.
Yeah.
And then this is some of the data that we were looking at here. Some of the anomalies we were trying to see what those were with the GPR. And then, of course, back to the summit on the way down. So let's flying the Texas flag there. That's this is all in a little book, a journal I put out called The Quest for Noah's Ark Expedition Journal. You can go to this site or go to aaronjudkins.com. And this kind of gives you the backstory, the history of, some of those earlier things we was talking about the writings, Josephus, Marco Polo, some of the artifacts, and then all the way up to the modern day searches and sightings, including Colonel Jim Irwin, others like Dick Bright and Dr. Don Shockey. So many people that's gone on before. One of the films that I did, Dr. Graves, right after our Qumran excavation. Matter of fact, when I left Qumran, I met up with a friend of mine. He's a film producer named Ty Towers. And Ty and I went up and went on a little excursion from Qumran all the way to Petra and back over to Jerusalem. And it's in a 90-minute film called Qumran to Petra. And so it's just a little free, it used to be free. I don't think it is anymore. It's like $4 or $5. But anyway, this is a particular film that we shot right after we broke at Qumran. And you can go to patreon.com/ancient pathways if you want to see that film. It's just a fun little film. We take you we're at the last day of Qumran there, and got some interviews with Dr. Price, and then we basically break away from there and then go across into Petra.
Into Jordan, yeah. I worked in Jordan for 15 seasons, so we've been to Petra many times. It's worth going down and having a look at, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This man has hiked the world from the mountains of Peru to Turkey's Mount Ararat.
6-hour trek up to the first base camp.
In search for lost evidence of truth.
And this man, well, he stayed in a few hotels.
This man's travelogue reads like a Raiders of the Lost Ark script.
And this man's, more like that of a drunken sailor.
This man is an esteemed doctor of archaeology.
Over the years, we excavated down.
This is a sandal footprint. A huge boulder had fallen on top of this.
And this man,
A lot of people probably died in here.
A lot of people probably died up here.
He writes about Jaja Banks back here.
I feel like we're walking around on Mars out in this place.
well, he is not. Dr. Aaron Judkins, aka the Maverick Archaeologist,
Welcome to the city of Petra.
teams up with Emmy-winning video producer Ty Taurus
He's having us close our eyes.
Come on.
The guy, there's not something to Molech down there, is there?
for a humorous two-man excursion into the hills and mountains surrounding the fabled Jordan Valley.
Qumran, it's awesome. It's where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. They found so much archaeological evidence of the accuracy of the scriptures.
See and hear firsthand
It's fun to look in the caves.
from the big league Bible hunters like Dr. Randall Price,
Now we have, for the first time, a voice from their time that's made the New Testament much more Jewish.
while they hunt for Dead Sea Scrolls
This is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. This is like God's library.
on location at legendary Qumran. Then hop on for the ride for the cave dives, trail hikes, and breathtaking ascents as Ty, Aaron, and the friends they meet explore the ancient ruins of Israel and Jordan. From Qumran to Petra. Sometimes they're a little less lost,
Completely lost.
sometimes a little closer to truth. But if you pay close attention, you might just pocket some little-known nuggets of truth.
That's what the sign says back there.
A travel logumentary where the treasure find is most often the people they encounter.
Look at this.
Join Aaron and Ty as they go in the footsteps of lost truth.
It was just a fascinating time to be involved in all that. And that was my third or fourth time to Petra, and I finally got to walk all the way through it.
It's a long
walked
trek.
up to the back. It's a long track, but I finally got to, and that I told my friend, I said, this time I'm walking all the way through, climbing up all the way to the back, and I finally got to do that. So
Got to the monastery, did you?
yeah, it's a wonderful place. That's just a little bit about some of my journeys I've been on. Of course, the whole finding Noah's Ark came out. That came out in a documentary film called Finding Noah, and I think that's available. Yeah, we didn't find Noah. We were looking, and we didn't find.
We've all been looking, but we still haven't uncovered it. Little missed the titles, but they do that for clickbait, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah, we found some organic remains under the ice. We had to send them off, had them tested. But the film's about the journey of a group of intrepid explorers who step out of their normal lives to go and risk their life to go search for something greater, a greater story than themselves.
Yeah, I wrote my memoirs. It's not the end of discovery; it's the journey.
It's the journey, yeah. And this is what the film Finding Noah is about. It's narrated by Gary Sinise. There's 3 or 4 songs from the Christian band For King and Country on there. It's out on Amazon Prime. I think you can watch it for free there. I probably have some DVDs if anyone wants a DVD, if they have a DVD player still, but if not, you can just go to Amazon.
If you send me the links, I'll post them at the bottom of the podcast for us.
Yeah, I don't have a link for the Amazon Prime. It's just type in the name Finding Noah, and it should be up on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
So
great.
Well, before we change topics, you did talk about several different cuneiform. I'm going to go and say tablets. These were still in the Sumerian Kings list, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Astrahazi, and then you mentioned the Babylonian map of the world with circular design in it with cuneiform. We just happen to have a copy here.
Oh, look at that. Nice.
Now, what you can see, we had this gentleman on the show about a year and a half ago, Dr. Irving Finkel from the British Museum. So let me put it here so it does.
That's right.
And the next time he's coming up, he's actually going to talk about this particular item because it's in the British Museum. And we can see these little starbursts here on the outer side, look like triangles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened was they had a docent, that's a volunteer at a museum, going through pieces of cuneiform, searching for ones that are unique and important. She found this triangle piece. It was in a big Tupperware box. And she had set it aside for Dr. Finkel to look at, a Syriologist, a curator. And he knew right away it belonged to the Babylonian map, and they took it to a conservator, and it just clicked right in place.
Wow.
So this is your Babylonian map. But so when you're talking about it, this is how big it is. It's not nearly as old because the dates on the other ones were like 2000, 2001, and 1600. And those are all, of course, BC. This is 600 BC. And it does have a listing in here. One of the little circles they got I'm going not hieroglyphs, cuneiform, and it does mention Aratu, location on the map, as you said. I thought people like to see what this looks like, because it isn't Mount Ararat. That's the translation. It's the mountains of Aratu. And here it is listed on this Babylonian map. Now, one side, of course, there's more information in cuneiform on the obverse of it. And then on the reverse, it's also loaded down. It's broken, but you can see.
Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
And for
So
all
anyway,
of our guests that are watching us, we always do a show and tell usually with our guests. So thanks, George, for the show and tell today. And stay tuned to our viewers. We actually have a few more guests coming on with some of the other artifacts, and we'll keep you posted as to what's been discovered and what's new.
Well, yeah, of course, because that was really interesting. I never seen, of course, I've seen documentaries on TV, but the way you brought us up the mountain was unique to this podcast for people to get a good understanding on what it takes to actually climb Mount Ararat, what it looks like from different angles, and approaching it from certain angles, and that you got to actually get climatized, and you go up and back down, and you have these base camps. So it isn't like, let's climb Mount Ararat today. First we're going to have a picnic, and now we're going to go climb Mount Ararat. And that you also mentioned that several people, and even the astronaut, got hurt. So there is a chance that a guy fell through. So it's a very dangerous adventure to try to go on.
Some of the Sherpas that have been killed. So it is a dangerous spot to be working in. And it's not very easy to get permits to climb with the local governments. You usually have to have a fairly large extra sum of money for some extras.
For some extras. Yeah, what you're not going to see in the film is part of our team getting captured by the PKK at gunpoint, and that's not going to be in the film Finding Noah, but it is real dangerous. And like you said, the permits are required, but there's just a lot of different channels, some official and some unofficial, that you have to go through. Because to them, it's all about, everybody's getting paid something, and that's just the way that works over there. So it's a difficult area to try to work in geopolitically. Then you need the necessary permissions. And as even you said earlier, Dr. Graves, that you thought you had the necessary permission. It turns out, maybe you didn't, maybe you needed another form. Who knows? It's so hard to know. But, back in 2013, we had worked with officials at the government level, and we did get permissions for 3 years running to be the only scientific team on the mountain at that particular time.
Yeah, we worked with all the archaeologists at Ataturk University, and had actually made trips there and had signed a formal agreement with them at the university. But yeah, I mean, you not only have the PKK, but you also have the wild dogs.
That's right. I didn't run into wild dogs on the mountain, but when I came off the mountain, where we were staying at around Pasha Palace there at the camp, what we called Camp M there,
Mm.
around Pasha Palace. I was out hiking a couple of days before my plane left, and so I was out hiking around, and there's some of those wild dogs out there, and you do not want to get tangled up with them.
No.
Big Anatolian dogs, and even the wild dogs that you mentioned. So lots of dangers. But we had one instance where our team got captured, and there was a demand for tax money. And when you think tax, you're like, well, what is it for? Well, they wanted to put new boots on the soldiers. They needed bread and clothing, rifles, whatever they needed. And of course, the sum was just outrageous. They wanted $600,000 U.S. dollars, which is just outrageous. But fortunately, our team was able to kind of talk their way out of it. And
Rex and I were detained as well by the military. So I wouldn't advise anybody to head out there thinking they're going to climb and just have a great holiday. It's not something that you do. You've got to go through the proper channels. You got to know what you're doing. And it's not just a pleasant vacation.
No, it's not. What another thing you're not going to see in the film Finding Noah is that the truce between the PKK and the Turkish government broke while we were on the mountain, and fighting started again. So just
elaborate a little bit, Aaron. Just elaborate for our guests a little bit about the political and cultural issues between Armenia and Turkey there, because I don't know if everybody understands how strategic this mountain is.
Yeah, so this particular mountain is a military stronghold in eastern Turkey, but it's controlled by the Kurdish PKK militarily. This mountain used to be basically in the backyard of Armenia. It was part of Armenia. It's part of Armenia's cultural history.
And they still claim it as theirs.
They claim it as theirs. They embrace the story. That was their original homeland. That was part of Armenia, going back to the Babylonian map and the region of Urartu, which was also abbreviated historically RRT, since there wasn't any vowels. So this all points really to the ancient ancestral lands of Armenia. But when it all got divvied up and carved up, it got put into eastern Turkey. So now the PKK control the mountain militarily. Of course, this overseas, on a good day, you can weather-wise, you can get up there and you can see all over the place. You can see for miles and miles and miles. It's a very strong military advantage to have that mountain there. But so you have a military zone there. You talked about Dr. Sparks early on. If you can just fly a helicopter up there, it's very difficult to. I've known some mark researchers Dr. Don Shockey, who did take a helicopter. They rented an old Russian, I think it was a Sikorsky helicopter, and they did several sorties around the mountain. But it's very difficult, one, because with the helicopter at that altitude, with those winds, you don't have a lot of lift. And so there's problems with lift, there's problems with winds that can slam you into the side of the mountain or cause you to lose lift, and then you're not flying anymore, you're falling.
You know what you're talking about because you fly in these things regularly.
Yeah, and so so it's not very, very useful to be in a helicopter, only for an aerial recon, perhaps to try to pinpoint something visually, but it's just too difficult to do it by helicopter.
Well, you still have altitude sickness when you get off the plane.
Yeah, and then you have altitude sickness and everything, and then trying to get to where, if you saw something, trying to get to where you saw it on the ground is extremely, extremely difficult. From the Armenian side of the Ahora Gorge, that's probably the most dangerous side there. There's cliffs and drop-offs that drop thousands and thousands of feet off.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in an earthquake-prone region anyway. We talked about crevasses. There was a Scottish climber who disappeared on the mountain before we were there. They never found him. We don't know if he was killed. We don't know if he fell through a crevasse. He fell off a cliff. He was hiking solo, which goes against mountaineering rules. You go by your, you go in twos, at least twos. But of course, he didn't have a permit to climb. A bunch of things happened, but they never found him. And about at the 14,000 foot base camp, there's actually a plaque on a rock with about 50 names on that plaque. He asked about that plaque. They said, "Oh, these are all the people who died on this mountain getting to this spot, or trying to get to the summit." Boy, that was an eye opener. You don't want your name on that plaque for sure.
Yeah, it's
so
spot for sure.
So lots of geopolitical challenges to hike the mountain. And of course, you got weather. It's just not a place where you can go up and look around. It's very challenging. You have to get yourself up there, the equipment, then you have to get to the target site. So what's the bottom line here?
It's not just as simple as even getting a permit. You've got to go through multiple layers of bureaucracy with the mayor of the city of Drupanar, or you got to get the permits of the state. You got to get permits of the universities. So it's a long, involved process. So
yeah, it is. It's
book a flight and go over and start hiking. It's not even like Everest.
No.
It would discourage anyone from trying.
Right. Our director of photography was, he said he's been in challenging environments and climbed, and I think Everest was one of his climbs. He told me he thought Ararat was one of the hardest ones he's done.
Yeah. At least politically and bureaucratically, even though it might not be the most difficult climb in the world. But perhaps, Aaron, you could maybe just comment a little bit for our audience about Drupanar, because that keeps coming up all the time.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that back up. We meant to close that loop. Drupanar, roughly 20 miles from Mount Ararat. It may be 18 or 19, but roughly 20. We went there. This is a particular site that was made famous by an ARC researcher named Ron Wyatt. Ron Wyatt picked it up from a Time magazine cover photo from 1960, which was a declassified photo from a NATO mission, which was running aerial photography recon over this area. When they were going through their photos, they noticed this one particular looking image that was interesting. And later on, it became declassified, and Time magazine bought rights to the photo and published it in 1960. Ron Wyatt then sees this photo on the cover of Time magazine.
And the name comes from...
Sorry?
The name comes from Drupanar.
Drupanar is from one of the NATO generals, Drupanar, who's named after, this site is named after his namesake, Drupanar.
Yep.
So he was the one that was in charge of the aerial surveying of the photography there, and came across this photo. It was labeled anomalous. They wasn't quite for sure what it was, but they had set it to the side, and then later Ron Wyatt sees it on the cover of Time magazine. He's convinced that it's Noah's Ark because of the shape. It has a diamond kind of shape to it, and it's long. He gets over to Turkey. Now, this is, I think, in the late 70s or early 80s when he gets over there. He doesn't quite know where it's at, but he eventually gets to it and finds it somehow. And over the course of years to, going through the 80s, he has several geologists and archaeologists come out to look at this particular site, which is now known as the Drupanar site. And initially, some of the other scientists, archaeologists, geologists were intrigued initially at some of the findings. However, after multiple surveys and studies on this particular site, they realized it's a natural geological formation.
Yeah.
And so some of the colleagues that we know, Dr. Graves, such as Dr. Randall Price and several others, including myself, have been on site, have studied it, looked at it, and it's not Noah's Ark. It's a natural geological formation.
Now, we've
Now,
taken
here's why.
samples and been there, and it's not, it's geological without any question, but it certainly looks intriguing, as you say, and
Yeah, intriguing.
led to a whole
Yeah.
bunch of stuff on the internet that just keeps. I found a few posts there last week on Facebook about how it's Noah's Ark found, and a lot of nonsense, really, but
Well,
people need to be
it's
educated.
Since Ron Wyatt passed away, and of course, a lot of ARC researchers, yourself included, myself, Dr. Randall Price, others. I talked to Dr. John Morris of ICR before he passed away. I knew Dr. Morris as well, and I asked him. Of course, he was a geologist, and he said that's not Noah's Ark. The reason people think it is, including Ron Wyatt, is because the length of it and the shape of it, and it kind of looked like maybe it was a boat. But we have to remember Noah's Ark was not a boat. It was a life support vessel. And the Hebrew word here is tibah, which means a rectangular box or a chest. Now, there was a word for a boat. They used the word. They used tibah, a rectangular box or a chest. It has another definition or meaning, but this is exactly what it was. It was a rectangular box. It was a life support vessel. It was not a ship. It was not designed to sail. There was no rudder. There was no keel and all this. It was basically a life support vessel and was built specifically in a 6-to-1 ratio. We know this because a Japanese study back in the late 90s did a research on models in non-motorized vessels in a 6-to-1 ratio. And they took these on a miniature scale. They took these models and they tried to get them to overturn in the waves. And in a 6-to-1 ratio in this non-motorized vessel, the structure would always right itself in the waves. If you went outside of the parameters of 6-to-1, you could easily topple it and turn it over many times.
Now, just so our audience understands, the Babylonian cuneiform tablets describe it as a circle or round vessel.
That's
And
true.
so there are other descriptions of it in ancient Near Eastern cultures that interpret things according to their culture. And of course, they're known for their round boats, their reed boats. But the biblical account is quite specific as to its dimensions.
That's right. That's right. And that's exactly why Ron Wyatt thinks it's the Ark, because it's roughly the same length and stuff. But remember, this is a diamond shape at the Drupal site. It's not a rectangle shape.
Right.
It's a natural geological formation. If you look at a Google Earth image, you can see several similar formations in this area. Dr. Morris and others told me it's a pyroclastic mud flow.
Every time we would go and visit, it would be a different shape. It would change because of the runoff from the glaciers that would actually change the geological formation of it. So
yeah,
it changes every year. We've seen it.
So I after personally visiting it, and studying it, I would have never climbed Mount Ararat at 17,000 feet, risking my life to go search for something if it was down in the valley floor somewhere that's easily accessible. This is not Noah's Ark. It's being perpetuated on the internet and being picked up by news agencies because to them, they think it's new information. And once you get something on the internet,
there's a big sign there that says it's Noah's Ark. There's a big sign there. The Turkish people government has posted there. It's Noah's Ark. That's good for tourism, but
not for people who are archaeologists and geologists. Look, it's not. People believe what they want to believe to be true, and it's very difficult when you're not an archaeologist or geologist. And when you see all these, headlines coming through major news medias, and of course, perpetually living on the internet, it appears to be factual, but it's not actual factual. It's a theory The site's never been excavated, and there's only circumstantial evidence, at best, that they have. Now, they've got permits now, I think, to actually perform actual excavations. I hope they do. I hope they excavate that thing all the way to the ground, because I don't think they're going to find anything. I don't think they're going to find anything there, and that'll solve the issue once and for all. But right now, the government of Turkey is, they're advocating that as a tourism site, so you can go and see it. And big ministries are going there with the television cameras and buses, and they're taking people and showing them the Ark. But
Aaron,
in my view, it's not the Ark.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe you could talk a little bit for our audience about the Chinese claim that they have the cave and they've got it filmed, and Randall was part of that, I guess. And or do you know anything about that?
I just know a little bit about it, that this claim by the Chinese, I think going back around 2008 or 9, said that they had made a discovery of the Ark. Dr. Randall Price actually tried to get them to confirm this particular site, but they wouldn't let him. They would never confirm it. There was no, hey, let's take you there. Let's get you on the site. Let's, have someone see it and verify it independently. And they had hired a local Kurd by the name of Parachute, who they were paying a lot of money to. And when they called and said, hey, we need to, show us your cards, he didn't have nothing. And so I think when he realized they were coming, he had to produce, I think it was a produced evidence. I think it was staged. And he had to.
It shows that it's been recreated. They actually built it, and as a scene that they could photograph, and so there's no truth to it all. So you got to really be careful on what you find out there on the internet and what the claims are. But it's all been debunked.
Yeah, and of course, Dr. Randall Price, I've had conversations with him about this. So this is, from what he has told me about his experience with them. He broke away from that team. Again, this, and there's, there's videos, on YouTube that shows them, rappelling down into a structure and stuff. But there's just no independent verification. And if they would just allow other people to, independently come in and verify. But I think anytime you're dealing with that part of the country, or, especially people who are making a living, by taking you places, to them, I think it gets to money. They'll take you wherever you want to go.
I've got
this is not going to be
actually of the cave itself that this is all staged in. So
this is all staged in. Yeah. And so they're not, you're not going to be able to, I don't think, be able to verify it. But again, the Ark has been exploited for several different reasons. It's really a sad sight to see that this has happened. People have state claims on it that they were the first to find it, and it's the first this and the first that. It just gets ridiculous. I don't care where it's found. If it's found on the Drupanar site, I'm fine with it. I don't think it is. If it's found up on the slopes of Ararat somewhere, or in the Ahora Gorge, I think more probably that's where it is. But I don't really care where it's found. I
may not
care
have even
that
survived, to be honest.
it may have not have survived. But look, here's something that I think is great. We don't need the evidence of Noah's Ark. It's not a requirement. We don't need it. We don't need to produce an artifact. It doesn't do anything for us. Would it be neat to find and verify and confirm and yeah, and if we can, here's what would happen. It would embolden people like you and I and Dr. Sparks and others in our faith. It's not required, but we're like, hey, great, here it is. We have proof of Genesis. Just another evidential apologetic we can use. Second camp would be people who were on the fence. Well, I kind of thought maybe that was true. I didn't really know for sure, but this seems to be, this has been confirmed. I'm not talking about the Drupanar side. I'm talking about an actual confirmation scientifically from independent researchers. That would probably win some over. and say, hey, I need to take a look at the Bible again. I need to see what this thing is about. 3, it would take the people who don't believe and are not going to believe, and they're never going to believe it, no matter how much evidence you show them, because they will reject any evidence, whatever it is. It's an atheistic or agnostic position they're going to take.
Even Jesus
so
said,
evidence it's not going to win them over.
Even if somebody rises from the dead, they're still not going to believe. So it's not a matter of evidence.
That's right.
It's a matter of the heart. So
that's right.
In the end, for me, it's not a matter of evidence. As you say, if we find it, great. That's interesting. But it's not a matter of belief. It's a matter of the science. So I really appreciate your input today, Aaron, and you're sharing your experience of your climb to Mount Ararat, which is rather unique. And I got a different perspective of the mountain from the Ahora Gorge, and you saw it from the top. So I really appreciate that. George, did you want to sign us out at this point, or did you want to try?
Yeah, let's sign us out. So, Dr. Aaron Judkins, thank you for your time again for today to give us your unique opinion and in your travels to Mount Ararat or Aratu. This is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Everybody have a great day.